So let's start with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are the favorites to go to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl this season. So obviously, I don't have to really tell you that they have one of the best rosters in the NFL. Clearly, Vegas believes that they have one of the best rosters in the NFL. And when you're looking at their team and what I think they need to do to go over the top. So the Buffalo Bills, we've heard from Sean McDermott, and I believe this is going to be something that they really have to hammer. Sean McDermott has stated that they want to upgrade their team speed. They have come out and said this publicly. And whenever a team says something publicly, usually they try to address it in a massive way. It's not just with one move or with a couple moves. Usually that team hammers that approach. So what does he mean by team speed? I mean, that could really be anything. My biggest guess would be on the defensive side of the football, specifically in the secondary, because their biggest competition over the past couple of years in that AFC has been the Kansas City Chiefs. And with a guy like Tyreek Hill, who's been the real issue for them, who they just can't seem to stop, they need somebody to cover him, and they also need just generally faster pursuit to the ball carrier, faster pursuit and tackling, and just in that coverage, faster cornerbacks and players that can convert from zone, which they play a lot of, to also playing some man when they need to. And that has been a flaw of that defense for the 4 or 5 years since Sean McDermott has gotten there, and they've really worked under this whole regime. I feel like they've been an excellent zone coverage team, but whenever they do have to play teams man-to-man, they have struggled in that department, specifically without, obviously, Tre'Davious White last season. But they were so close to not only beating the Chiefs, but also winning the Super Bowl. So it's not a ton of huge things in this department on this team. But when we go from offense to defense, as I'm going to do with every team, and you guys can see the top 5 teams on the lower third there, or top 5 needs, I should say. You start with the offense, and I think you start with the offensive line. I think they definitely need to look at protecting Josh Allen, specifically in the middle. So the guard position, they've got Mitch Morse at center, who's still locked and loaded for a bit, who they've signed, I believe, a couple years ago, pretty long term. He's still a solid player. I wouldn't call him an elite center, but he's somewhere in that 10 to 15 range, I would assume. The guard position could certainly use an upgrade, specifically at left guard. They do have a free agent at left guard. So Dion Dawkins, you've got Darrell Williams, who played right guard last year a lot, but could also play right tackle because he's played both positions. But Spencer Brown spent a lot of time playing right tackle, I should say, which I'm not sure if that's their future plans or not. If you guys know for sure, then let me know what their future plans are at right tackle. I would assume Darrell Williams is the better player at that position, so maybe even upgrading both the guard positions wouldn't be a bad idea. I do think they could do that throughout the draft. You know, you can find quality guards in the 2nd, 3rd round, maybe even the 4th round at times if you're good at drafting those positions. But I also look at the guard position in this free agency, and I see a lot of like marginal upgrades for a lot of teams. So this is going to be a common theme for me throughout these free agency team game plans, but there's a lot of guards out there, and I'm just going to pull up my guard list. There's a lot of guards up there that I feel like can contribute to teams this season. So even when you get past the first level of guys of like the Brandon Scherfs and the Tomlinsons and the Connor Williams, there's guys like Ted Karras from the Patriots that are out there, AJ Cann, Michael Schofield, Trey Turner, Alex Kappa, I think is a really good one, honestly. Andrew Norwell is a veteran who would be actually a very nice addition. So if I was looking specifically at the Bills, this is a team in the Super Bowl window, I'd be trying to aim for a guy like Andrew Norwell specifically to come in. Very good pass protector from the Jags, very consistent player. I would call him, in probably not in the like top 10 guards, but he's somewhere in that 2nd tier now. He's no longer elite. He used to be a very good player, but he's always maintained a really good pass protection. He also used to play in Carolina, and obviously the Bills have many connections to Carolina. So Andrew Norwell would be a nice free agent addition at the guard position. Wide receiver, I do think they could use some help. Isaiah McKenzie and Emmanuel Sanders are both free agents. I do think you could aim to get younger at the position, with obviously Cole Beasley getting a little bit older. Adding a younger player in, like, let's say the second or the third round, maybe later, the third round might not be a bad idea, but just getting that quality number 4 receiver. And I could see Buffalo going the approach of aiming at a lower tier free agent and then also bringing in a younger receiver as well. So pairing that kind of strategy together to help the depth of the wide receiver position, because Cole Beasley did regress last year and he's continuing to regress. I think it would be wise to sign Isaiah McKenzie and have him play more next year, but I do think that they could add to wide receiver and just generally get faster at wide receiver. That wouldn't be a bad idea. Running back, they could use an upgrade, but they do have Devin Singletary and Zach Moss still on the roster, and they're not free agents, so it's not a pressing need. The same could be said about tight end. They could sign Rob Gronkowski, who there's been rumors floated out there for him, but Dawson Knox is not a free agent. He's on the team, so there's no real pressing need for either position. It would be nice, though, for them to get a game-changing running back. I know Saquon has been floated out there as a potential trade. Personally, I don't think they should be trying to invest a lot of capital into a running back, but bringing in a nice pass catcher specifically at the running back position, wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe somebody like Jerick McKinnon wouldn't be a bad signing. Somebody of that like Matt Breida level that they got last year, but hopefully just hit better than Matt Breida did last year. For whatever reason, never really had a role on the team. Defensively is really where they've got a lot more needs, but you look at the interior defensive line is going to definitely need some work. Harrison Phillips is a free agent. Vernon Butler is a free agent. Justin Zimmer is a free agent. F.A. Obata is a free agent. So all these guys are free agents, and all of them play mostly inside. They still got Ed Oliver, who's kind of their big time player, I guess, in the inside. Although he's not fantastic, but he's a starter. And they got Star Lotulelei, who's getting up there in age. I'm not sure if they're going to cut him. I'm not exactly sure about that. He doesn't play a ton, but he has been important to their run defense in recent seasons when he's on or off the field. Their edge position, Jerry Hughes is a free agent and Mario Addison is a free agent. So both of those guys have been key contributors for them last year, and obviously Jerry Hughes for many seasons has been their best pass rusher. Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, these guys are on the team. And, obviously young Basham Jr. as well could take a bigger step forward next year. But I think they're going to expect a lot from Rousseau moving forward and Ed Oliver moving forward. But this is a team that definitely needs to look at some veteran additions on the D-line. I would love for them to get a difference-making edge rusher if they could. If they had the maneuverability, obviously they don't have a lot of cap space, but it would be really nice for them to get like a superstar D-end. A lot of teams could use a superstar D-end, and hopefully that's what Gregory Rousseau ends up becoming, but he's not that right now. He does look pretty good, but they're probably going to get Jerry Hughes back. I wouldn't be shocked by that, but they could also use another layer behind that. I thought their pass rush was actually pretty good last year, and they could use a little bit more size in the middle of their defense for when they play teams like the Colts and they play teams like the Patriots, who are going to try to run you over. So, having the extra big body in the middle is definitely something that you could get for cheap, and something that I feel like would definitely be something I would address. So looking at the interior defenders on the list, you've got obviously the big names of Campbell and Hicks, but moving past that, I think somebody like, let's just say, obviously you got Harrison Phillips, who's solid, but, maybe you could go out and sign a Sue, right? Maybe you could sign an Ndamukong Suh to be a rotation player. He's older. He still can play, though. Or like, Linval Joseph. There's a lot of guys here that are older that would want to play on a team like the Bills that want to win a Super Bowl, obviously. These guys can come in and defend the run well and blow up the run when you need that to take place. Edge rushers, looking at the edge rusher list here, you've got, who would be a nice fit here? I would just think maybe you could look at like Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, who actually played pretty well for the Chiefs. I don't think they have enough money to really go out there and get the big names, obviously, so I'm trying to look at more manageable. JPP, Arden Key, maybe. Dante Fowler, maybe you could rejuvenate him. That wouldn't be a bad, low-risk sort of signing. Linebacker, they're good. They've got Edmonds and Milano, and they've also got AJ Klein, so they've got 3 linebackers there that can play. Cornerback position could certainly use some speed. I think they're going to look to get young at that position, probably draft that position. But there are some free agents that they can target. And like I said, their common theme this offseason is going to be speed, team speed, specifically in the back end. So cornerback position. Let's say a guy like, because you got to be able to fit their system. But they've had Levi Wallace for a lot of seasons, and I'm not sure if he's going to come back. But maybe you take a chance on a guy like Dante Jackson. Very fast, very raw, has some talent. Another Carolina guy. There you go. So, has the basis for the scheme, obviously. I believe he was there with Ron Rivera for at least 1 year. I think they drafted him. So somebody like that, maybe they could try to take a gamble on like a Bryce Callahan, but I do feel like their nickel position is solid. Maybe it could be a little bit better, but they're really looking for that number 2 corner on the opposite side of Tre'Davious White. So taking chances on, a guy like Dante Jackson might not be a bad target for them. Somebody like that. So that's the Bills. Not a ton of needs, but like I said, a lot of team speed, trying to address speed in the back end specifically, trying to get more veteran pass rushers and adding to that rotation, getting a big guy inside to help stop the run. Offensively, you want to add that number 4, number 5, that depth of receiver, and hopefully a guy that can take Cole Beasley's spot down the road. And then really trying to upgrade, finding the diamonds in the rough at the guard position would be nice. So that's kind of the theme for the Bills, one of the better teams in the NFL, and I assume will do a good job this free agency as they have for many seasons in a row. All right, let's get to the New England Patriots, guys. What's up, Natasha, Jake? Basketball and football moments. Thanks, guys, for joining. Durkant. Jake, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, hope you're doing good, brother. You hear about Gronk maybe going to Buffalo. So carrying over that Buffalo conversation. Thank you, Jake, for the $5, man. You're the man. Thank you guys for the super chats. Yes, I've heard about it, and it's interesting. I think, and Ultra sent me it, and he was like, "Oh, you would be mad about this, basically, right?" And I was like, "No, I actually like the Bills. I know that's weird to say. I'm a Patriots fan, but I really like the Bills because I think Josh Allen is amazing. I've always been a Josh Allen guy, so I think the Bills are a really, really good football team. And if Gronk wants to go there, he's got a great quarterback. I think he would fit in. I think he would be a big target for them. And he could win another Super Bowl there. So, and it's also his hometown team. So, thinking about you as a fan, what would it be like to play for your hometown team, the team that you grew up with, the team that you cheered for? That would be pretty cool. So for anybody to go there, you got to think outside the box unselfishly. I think that would be a good move for Gronk and for the team, personally. So let's look at the New England Patriots. Of course, my team of choice. And I don't even know why I'm scrolling to their depth chart as if I don't know every single player on the team. But I am anyways. So we've got the New England Patriots, and they did a lot of work in last free agency. So I think this free agency, in a lot of ways, I don't know if it's more interesting than last year, right? But it is very interesting because last year they kind of went all in and just tried to establish and impact as many positions as humanly possible and try to upgrade as many positions as humanly possible, just throwing money at people. Like Nelson Aguilar, here's a bunch of money to play receiver. Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Van Noy, come back. We need you. Matt Judon, be our edge rusher. Jalen Mills. We're just going to throw money at people. And this offseason, it's a little bit different. They have money, and I do think their cap space is going to increase when they restructure some contracts and things. So they're going to have some flexibility with what they do. But I do think there's definitely more clear targets this offseason than last offseason. Last offseason was establishing the basis of what they need. we need some talent, period, last offseason, right? We need edge rushers, we need tight ends, we need wide receivers, we need O-linemen, we need this, we need that. So Belichick's just getting these guys. And now it's like, okay, we need these specific upgrades. And that's how we take it to the next level. We're figuring out kind of like who we are and the guys that can play well for us. But now we need those specific upgrades. And as you guys can see, the biggest needs on the team. Let's start offensively, wide receiver. Now, my biggest hunch here is that they're going to go towards the draft at the wide receiver position and probably address wide receiver multiple times in the draft. Twice, potentially, I would think, with one early pick in the first or second round and then one later pick in the 6th or 7th round. Somebody in that top 4 group at wide receiver and somebody near the end that they feel can contribute, because they've already spent a bunch of money on the receiving core when you include the tight ends and you include Nelson Agholor. Nelson Agholor is going to be on the team this year. I would find it, it would be challenging for him to not be on the team. I still think he's a good player. I don't think he was correctly utilized on the team. But he adds speed, he adds a vertical threat, and he's a consistent receiver. He's just not a number 1. And I think he's looked at as more really the number 3 option in this receiving game at the wide receiver position when you consider Kendrick Bourne could really become, a nice number 2 this year. I think he might even become the number 1 receiver on this team. He really had that type of impact and that type of chemistry with Mac Jones. Is he, a talent that you usually would say is a number 1 receiver? No, but like in the past, guys like Deion Branch and those sort of guys, Troy Brown, Kendrick Bourne fits into that mold of that type of guy that could, just be a very reliable target for that quarterback and build chemistry with that guy. So Kendrick Bourne's kind of a home run for this team from last offseason. And I think Nelson will be on the team. Nelson Agholor will be on the team for one more year, and then they'll probably move on from him after this year, just given the way his contract is structured. Jacoby Myers is still there, who's a nice middle of the field slot receiver. He's not a vertical threat. He's not very fast, but he is reliable. He's a good route runner. So he's a nice number 3, number 2 option. And really behind that, obviously, N'Keal Harry's going to be gone. There's no question. Gunnar Olszewski, I don't know if he's going to be on the team, to be honest with you. It's rather as a punt returner or he's gone. They could look to free agency, but I do think free agency is going to be more so like some of the diamonds in the rough at wide receiver are just kind of taking shots at guys. So, maybe they try to target Braxton Berrios, who went to the Jets. They cut him, went to the Jets. They didn't want to cut him. They actually chose Gunnar over him, which was a mistake. And then he goes to the Jets and actually is been pretty good for them. They could target, guys like Russell Gage, Keelan Cole, if they want to add speed, Valdez Scantling, Will Fuller, these type of guys, maybe even Juju. I could see them targeting Juju. He's kind of their type of receiver, but I don't expect them to try to target Adams, Godwin, Mike Williams, Allen Robinson, Odell, maybe Odell, because Belichick has an infatuation with him. But other than that, I don't really see them going all out for a big receiver. I think like the lower tier guys, maybe they'll take a swing at, but I think they're going to look to the draft for wide receiver just because it might be a bit pricey at that position to upgrade in free agency. On the offensive line, which New England loves to put a lot of capital into offensive line, Isaiah Wynn is still there, at least for one more season. I think this is his 5th-year option this year. Trent Brown is a free agent, which is their biggest priority in my opinion. I do believe that Ted Karras will end up walking and going somewhere else because my guess is that they're going to have Michael Onwenu slide into guard and take over for Ted Karras and then have Trent Brown playing at right tackle and then probably trying to find the next Ted Karras as like a backup type that can play a bunch of positions with a cheaper contract. So my guess is Trent Brown will be back and they'll move on from Ted Karras and Michael Onwenu will take over at guard, which in case would create one of the best offensive lines in football. Jonnu Smith's not leaving. I know a lot of fans kind of upset with his production, but he'll be around at least for one more year. I just think the change in offense might be interesting to see if he develops in the system in his 2nd year. Running back's good. It would be nice to have James White back, or if they don't get James White back, they're going to look to probably draft a running back with the same sort of skill set. It doesn't appear that J.J. Taylor is going to be that type of guy. Brandon Bolden's also a free agent. He'll be back if he wants to play. Defensively, this is actually where I think the team has a lot more needs. Really, when you look at the offense, a lot of the players are going to be back. It's really just Trent Brown that's a free agent. That's a big deal to me. Other than that, everybody else is there. They just could add some players to it through the draft or free agency. Now, on defense, they've got some actual significant names that are free agents. So you're talking about the whole linebacker position of Jamie Collins, Dante Hightower, Jawan Bentley. So they really have an opportunity, in my opinion. Belichick does, and this is going to be fascinating because Belichick's a defensive guy. He typically makes really, really intelligent defensive personnel moves and typically sees where defense is going before everybody else. And this has been one of the biggest and best things about Belichick, the GM. He's very good at kind of figuring out where the NFL is and addressing his defense in that way. I do think there is a strong chance that Belichick completely redos and remakes his linebacking core. You could see them re-signing, Hightower back to like a 1-year low money contract because of the respect and the leadership factor. But I don't see Bentley coming back. I'd be surprised, honestly. I don't think Collins will be back, even though I thought he played okay. And they've got the weird thing is they've got some younger players at edge that I don't really think have panned out. But like Winovich and Uche have shown sparks and flashes, but they haven't necessarily been consistent. So I'm not sure if they're going to look to that position, but they have all those players coming back. So I'm not necessarily sure they're going to target that position, but definitely linebacker. Looking to upgrade team speed at the linebacker position, specifically guys that can cover would be my guess. The corner position, obviously, you start with J.C. Jackson, who is a free agent. I want him back. If I was the GM, I would sign him to whatever contract the guy needs. He's arguably the best corner in the NFL. He's only 25 or 26 years old. He is an absolute stud. Can really fit any system. I've seen a lot of Patriots fans with some slander towards J.C. Jackson, and I don't understand it at all. I'm not sure if they watch the guy or... Here's the problem. I don't think they watch other cornerbacks. I think they expect everybody to be Darrelle Revis and Ty Law in their prime, and JC might not be there yet, but he could get there, which is the scary thing about letting him go because he is so young. This was his best year, and I think he was he an all-pro? He was at least close. So J.C. Jackson is going to get a big contract no matter where he goes. My guess would be he comes back, but I'm not 100% sure about that, and I am definitely fearing a day where he leaves because I remember the days when the Patriots stunk at corner, and it was not fun. Devin McCourty, if he wants to play, will be back. I have no question about that. I think he rather retires or he remains a Patriot. I can't really see him leaving. There's no real point to him leaving, to be honest with you. He has 3 Super Bowls. Like, I don't think he's chasing a ring. I think he just wants to play for the fun, of it. And I don't think he would go anywhere else. He's a Patriot, and that's kind of his legacy. So I don't really see him leaving. But you've got Adrian Phillips and Kyle Duggar who are kind of foundational to this defense. But when you look at this defense and what they've got to do, you've got to address speed at the second level, linebacker. You've got to get depth at corner, specifically perimeter corner. I think like having Jonathan Jones back is going to be huge, but then also having guys like Jalen Mills and Miles Bryant who can play the nickel position are nice to have behind that. So like you have a layer of depth at the nickel position. So I don't think nickel is necessarily the problem. It's like what happens if, you do lose, like, let's say one of your top 3 corners. And last year, the problem was they didn't have the depth that they had in the past because they let go of Gilmore and then Jonathan Jones got hurt. Clearly, Jawan Williams isn't an answer here. He could be gone. I don't think he's going to make the team next year. And you really don't have a lot of answers unless Shaun Wade becomes that answer. So you're looking at corners in free agency, in my opinion. So I don't think it's really good enough for the Patriots to go out there and just sign JC back. I think they've got to go out there and try to attack the depth of this position. Obviously with guys that can play, a good mix of man and zone, but probably more man. I think a good target would be somebody like Charvarius Ward of the Kansas City Chiefs. I think would be a very good number 2 corner. He's kind of been their number 1 corner a lot of times. You could look towards the draft as well, high in the draft, but that would probably only come if JC leaves. I don't really think they're going to put a ton of capital in there if he doesn't. You never know, though, because the Patriots have really looked at the corner position very highly in the past and tried to establish that very, very much so in the past. So the corner position is huge for them, and I would look for them to really try to attack that. But mostly the team, it just comes down to the 2 big re-signings of Trent Brown and J.C. Jackson. Everyone else is kind of like come or go. Devin McCourty obviously would be nice to have back. Everybody else I wouldn't really care. But getting receivers, getting corners, and linebacker speed. And that's pretty much it. Everything else can probably be, you got Christian Barmore, who's going to get better. You've got some younger players like Josh Uche, who probably play a bigger role. Matt Judon's there again. Kyle Van Noy's still there. Kyle Duggar's going to take a step forward. This team's got a pretty solid roster. They've just got a couple spots where they've got to improve, specifically on the perimeter of their offense and their defense. And if they can do that, they could be a real player in the AFC if Mac takes a step forward, which you're counting on moving forward. Because some people may say they need to add to their run defense. I don't think I don't think you really need to, unless you cut like Lawrence Guy and then you try to replace him with somebody else. They could go with that. His contract's definitely movable. But having Godshaw, Wise, Guy, Barmore, these guys are all on the team still. So I think that's more of a approach thing, a coaching approach thing. I think the secondary and the linebacker level, having speed and coverage is more important to me in this day and age, especially when you play the Bills twice a year. You got to compete with the Chiefs. You got to compete with Herbert. You got to compete with Joe Burrow. So pass coverage is way more important to me at this point for the Patriots. All right. Before we get to the Dolphins, Jake, thank you so much for another super sticker. Thank you, Jake. Thank you guys, by the way, for tuning in live. If you haven't already, make sure you do Gronk spike that like button. All right, the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are going to be real interesting because for the first time in a couple of years, they have a new coach and a new regime. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But you have to think, when you think about new regimes, got to think about the old teams that they were a part of. And this is a common theme in the NFL nowadays. They try to replicate what the other team did well. Because usually, when a coach is hired, he's coming from a place of success, right? And Mike McDaniel's coming from a place of the 49ers. So he's coming from a place of success under Kyle Shanahan. So when you try to look at the Dolphins, you've got to say, how is Mike McDaniel going to try to replicate the 49ers with the Dolphins? It's not going to be exactly the same, but he's going to look for key elements of that team to bring forth to Miami. So we look at the offensive side of the football, and everybody knows where I'm going to go with this one. Offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. So I think you start at the tackle position. Eichenberg was a high pick last year, a second-round pick. I believe, was he out of Notre Dame? But a second-round pick, and going to be interesting to see because Austin Jackson was also a first-round pick. So they've spent multiple high picks on the tackle position in recent years. They also spent one on Robert Hunt, which I believe started as a tackle and moved inside to guard. Robert Hunt has become a good player. Eichenberg, it's questionable. I think if they could get a Armstead or get a big-time free agent at tackle, and specifically ones that are mobile, like they can move in space, because you want to be able to run that zone scheme. So maybe not necessarily the Trent Browns of the world or the Orlando Browns of the world. But, I mean, obviously Armstead would be good in any system. But like guys like that can move better. When you look at the Niners, obviously that's also a bad comparison because they have Trent Williams who could play in any system. But like a guy like Morgan Moses, honestly, would be an upgrade for them, and I think he fits that system fairly well. Riley Reif has played in that system quite a bit. I mean, even him would be an upgrade to what they've had. But mostly the tackle position is pretty weak, honestly, in free agency. They can maybe go after somebody with upside. Jermaine Ifedi has been a pretty good run blocker in the past, so if they wanted to focus more so on run blocking, they could go that way. Dennis Kelly is the same. A little bit older, veteran, but can run block. Cam Robinson's still young, but hasn't really played well. Eric Fisher, they could maybe get on a 1-year contract that could upgrade. But, I feel like they're going to... It's hard. I think they should look towards free agency. They should try to target one of the big names, and I specifically think Teron Armstead is the guy, because I don't think Orlando Brown or Dwayne Brown or Trent Brown necessarily fit this team or this scheme very well. So I feel like if they miss out on Teron Armstead, they're going to go towards the draft at the tackle position. But I do think that the guard position, which is also a position of need, because all of the free agency positions of need are there. So you've got guard, but Brandon Scherf is a fit. Laken Tomlinson is obviously a fit. He played for the 49ers. Connor Williams, I also think, is a fit. James Daniels is a fit. Austin Corbett is a fit. All of these players, I think, at the top of the free agency rankings for the guard position are all fits for Miami. So where they could really spend money here is potentially on guard, because they've spent a lot of capital in first and second round tackles, and there's really only one tackle that I think ideally fits their system at the top with the big price tag. So maybe they go with a veteran like a Riley Reif, a little bit lower scale. But they could look to upgrade left guard and maybe go with Tomlinson from the 49ers, maybe go with Connor Williams or James Daniels or Austin Corbett there at left guard. And I would be probably trying to go for Armstead. I'd go in there as hard as I could. If I couldn't get him, I'd shift my focus towards one of the elite guards. But I probably am not looking to spend a lot of money on both positions. And then you also have center, which is also a position of need for them. So all of really the offensive line is going to have a makeover. For the Dolphins, you've got Ryan Jensen, who could fit any system, but I do think he's more of a power blocker than a zone blocker. Ben Jones is a veteran, would be a nice fit in this system, but he's a little bit older. Brian Allen, I think, would be nice. I think somebody that might be a little bit low-key, but not bad, is Austin Blythe. Maybe Matt Paredes, but I think it's tough. There's not a ton of centers there. I think maybe you could see what Brian Allen's going for. And that might be the guy that you target there at the center position for the Dolphins. But really, their whole offensive line needs work. Wide receiver position, you've got Jalen Waddle, who's a certified stud and probably going to be your Deebo Samuel of this team. Not exactly the same, but utilize similar. Devontae Parker will be the Brandon Ayuk for now. And then you've got to look probably to a third receiver. But as you guys have seen with the Niners, they're more so of a heavy personnel team. At least the way they're currently constructed with Kyle Shanahan. So maybe the Dolphins bring in a fullback. That's something that people don't really think about, but bringing in a fullback that can block and maybe do a little bit of pass catching might be a low-key need for the Dolphins that not a lot of people are thinking about. Their running back position could certainly use a lot more speed. Currently on the roster, Myles Gaskin, Ahmed, Duke Johnson. These guys are slow. They are not burst fast guys. And Miami, and with running Mike McDaniel's offense, they're going to need speed at the running back position. So they could look into Cordero Patterson as that hybrid playmaker, but he might be a little bit pricey for me personally. And I think he wants to stay in Atlanta. But when you look at the other players, you're probably laying off a Leonard Fournette. He's not that type of fit. James Conner's not that type of fit. Melvin Gordon, not that type of fit. But you get towards guys like maybe Rashad Penny, maybe Raheem Mostert, obviously. So there's some speed at this position that you could maybe look towards down the road, but running back in the draft is also never a bad way to go as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they spent a little bit of money on the running back position, because they've got a lot of money. So spending, for a Raheem Mostert for 1 year, maybe, and then going to the draft and getting another guy also that fits the system. The Niners have not been shy of acquiring running backs in the past, so I would expect McDaniel does the same thing. Defensively, obviously Tua will be the starting quarterback next year. Tight end Mike Gesicki, I forgot about, but I don't see him coming back. And the reason I don't see him coming back, I don't necessarily think he's a great fit for this offense. Because he's not a blocker, I don't really see him fitting what they like to do. So I think if they're going to get a tight end, it's going to be somebody more with like a balanced skill set, let's say, of like a little bit of blocking presence, but also receiving element. So they could be in on a Dalton Schultz. They could be in on, who else? Who's somebody like, I don't think it's going to be anybody major. Let's see if I can remove that. Robert Tonyan would be interesting because he played with Matt LaFleur. So that's maybe one to look out for. OJ Howard, possibly. David Njoku as well, maybe. If they want to still spend some money at tight end. But tight end's typically an important position for them. But a lot of that has to do with George Kittle because he's just so good. So then you look at the defensive side of the football, and I don't think they're going to shift too far from what Brian Flores was doing. Their personnel is already kind of fit for that. The thing that sucks is they don't have Brian Flores anymore. So their defense is probably going to stay relatively similar, but shift maybe a little bit just in terms of maybe less blitzing. But you look at the linebacker level, I think you could probably just let go of the guys that are free agents, Duke Riley, Elandon Roberts, Brennan Scarlett. Not bad players necessarily, but not must-haves. All of them are going to be cheap if you want them back. Jerome Baker's developed into a good player, and I think, again, you could add a veteran to that position if you like. I don't think it's a massive need. Defensive line, I think, is pretty good with Davis and Wilkins in the middle, and then Butler as kind of your third down pass rusher as well. So that's solid. I don't see them adding anything massive to that position, but certainly edge rusher could be interesting because Emmanuel Ogbah is a very good player, and he's been arguably the best defensive player on their team the last 2 years. Arguably. I don't know if he is, but arguably. So if he leaves, that would be a massive loss. Obviously, they drafted Jalen Phillips, who I like. If they did shift to more of a 4-3 style, like let's say like a traditional more so of what the Niners run a little bit more, then I think he'd thrive in either system. So I think you're fine there. But Emmanuel Ogbah, I think they'd like to have back, but I do think he's going to get a lot of money on the open market. So Miami's going to have to dish out some dough. So maybe they look towards the draft to address that. I don't think this is a huge, I guess it is a decent pass rush draft, but I've heard that there's some uncertainty. I haven't necessarily studied it all, but there are some good pass rushers in free agency. There's guys like Chandler Jones, who you could be in on, who kind of fits every system. Same could be said about Von Miller if you're looking for a short-term solution. But guys similar to Ogbah, I'd look at maybe Hassan Reddick, Harold Landry, both kind of fit the same vein of this defense. JPP is a vet that could fit it as well. Lorenzo Carter is a sneaky name to look out for. Those guys all kind of fit that sort of style of defense, that if you lose Emmanuel Ogbah, that might be alternative targets for you to look at. I think the partnership of Ogbah and Phillips would actually be very nice if you could retain that. Safety position, Holland is a stud and very young. Brandon Jones is decent. Eric Rowe is decent. They could maybe add some depth to that, but I don't think they're going to add massive, huge additions. Their corner positions are all pretty much locked down, it feels like here. Justin Coleman is a free agent, so maybe you look to re-sign him, but he played pretty well last year. So nickel corner could be something that they look towards. Maybe you bring back Justin Coleman and you add somebody younger to the mix. But of course, the man coverage is probably going to still be in their system a lot. So somebody maybe like Desmond King is also out there. I don't think necessarily DJ Reed or anybody like that really fits their system. Maybe Bryce Callahan. Chris Harris is getting a little bit older. I don't really see that. So I think Justin Coleman's probably the best answer if you want to retain him. But really, for the Dolphins, it's all about the offensive line. It would be nice to add another receiver. But offensive line, trying to bring in some speed at running back to get that run game going for the Dolphins and the Mike McDaniel style. And then kind of thriving off of that, you probably let Gesicki walk, and then you add, hopefully you get Emmanuel Ogbah back. The defense is pretty well set. I can't really complain about it. It's really just depth that they've got to add to. But pretty much, guys, I mean, all the money and most of the assets are going to go towards the offensive side of the football, with a huge shift towards a new philosophy. So you're going to see a lot of different running backs, a lot of new tight ends, a lot of new receivers, a whole new offensive line. And then defensively, they're just going to look to add depth. I think that's really what the case is going to be for the Dolphins. I don't think it's overly complicated here. And if it was me, I would be looking in this first season to really, really, really try to establish the Mike McDaniel offense and try to get that offensive line cooking. So that would be my approach towards the Dolphins. Then we've got the New York Jets to finish off the AFC East. And I realize I'm going long, but this is kind of what it's for, just to talk these out because I find it interesting. If you guys don't, that's fine. But we got the New York Jets. So we got the New York Jets, and the Jets are a team, now alternatively, that probably need a lot. So this is one where I feel like you could really tell me a bunch of different things, and I would agree. Now, something that I will say about the Jets is I do think their offensive line is pretty underrated, at least in currently how it is now. You know, you look at last offseason, they were really bad last offseason, like terrible. Like, you had to reshape the whole offensive line. Really now, I mean, you get your left tackle back, Becton. You let that left tackle come back in Mekhi Becton. And then you've got Becton. You've got Elijah Vera Tucker at left guard. You've got Connor McGovern at center. It's pretty solid. Greg Van Roten at right guard, who's not bad. And then Morgan Moses is the only free agent. So across the offensive line, you're really good on the left side, and you're young on the left side. And then the right side probably needs some retooling. So maybe you bring back Morgan Moses. I do think he's going to have a market because he's a good player. So that might be tough to do. But you look at the right tackle position, so let's just check tackle real quick. You could probably replace him, though. So they run more of that zone scheme, running game. So I brought up kind of those guys already. But Eric Fisher, I don't think they'll be in play for a Teron Armstead personally. They could look towards Riley Reif, Jermaine Ifedi, Bobby Massey, Cornelius Lucas, Dennis Kelly, Tom Compton. Any of these guys would fit, in my opinion, what is it Mike LaFleur is doing offensively. And again, talking about what we talked about with the Dolphins, this is the Kyle Shanahan scheme. So you're looking for those more mobile movers on the offensive line and not the big galoots like the Trent Browns of the world. But Morgan Moses would be nice to have back. I think you can afford him. You've got lots of money. So if he wants to come back, cool. But if not, you've got alternative options. I do think running back could use a little bit of a boost, but obviously that's not a huge need for any team, in my opinion. Michael Carter's probably going to be your starter. I don't think that's bad. Ty Johnson's not terrible, but you can maybe draft one later in the draft for some upside. Wide receiver position is definitely a need. You've got Elijah Moore, who's coming into his second year, I think can be a good player. Berrios is a free agent. Crowder is a free agent. Keelan Cole is a free agent. So you got 3 free agents there. And you got Corey Davis coming back. So you've got your number 1 and your number 2, basically, right? Davis and Moore. Hopefully Moore becomes a number 1 because Davis is more of a good number 2. You've got to look for a slot receiver. So maybe that's Jamison Crowder or maybe that's Braxton Berrios, but you've got to pick one of them. If you want one of them back, you could go towards the draft and look for Zach Wilson in the first round. That could be maybe something that they do. But you look towards wide receiver here in free agency, and they've got money to spend. So it's going to be interesting, though, if they can pull any of these bigger names. I'm not necessarily sure they'll be able to. No, Zach Wilson's their quarterback. They don't need a quarterback. Maybe Russell Gage, somebody like that. Cedric Wilson's a low-key name that has played slot before. So those are kind of the names. Rashard Higgins, I don't know. But yeah, another wide receiver, obviously. Probably going to be rather Crowder or Barrios or Cole, like one of those guys that was already on the team. Because I actually felt like when your receiving core was healthy, it was kind of underrated. And Denzel Mims is still on the team, but he hasn't really developed. So that's the offense. Mostly offensive line, mostly wide receiver and retaining Morgan Moses. Maybe add a running back late. Tight end could use a player for sure. I'm not sure if they're going to be in on tight end. Dalton Schultz could be a nice addition there. Like I said, for Miami, they're not necessarily looking for the pure receiving type. So you guys signing Gesicki to me would be surprising. Or somebody like Zach Ertz or Evan Ingram is probably going to be surprising to me. But, somebody like Schultz, Njoku, even like Max Williams or Robert Tonyan. Robert Tonyan would actually be a great fit because he played obviously with Matt LaFleur. So that's another guy that, again, for the Dolphins, I think he's actually an underrated name in this free agency. That would be a good add. There's always good old reliable Jared Cook if you want to go there as well. Defensively, you've got a very good interior defensive line, and I don't think that needs work at all. So you've got Quinnen Williams and John Franklin Myers, who plays on the edge and in the inside. You've also got Sheldon Rankins, who's a good run stuffer. Kyle Phillips isn't bad. So there's some players there. And then you do have a couple guys that are free agents, though. Shepard and the guy that I don't know how to say his name, but he's a beast. Fadukazi, let's go with. I don't know, but he's a good run defender. Those guys, I probably just let them walk. I mean, unless you can just... you don't really need to, sign them. If you want to, you can. It's kind of like I wouldn't really necessarily be desperate. I do think they could use linebackers. So this is a defense. Robert Saleh likes linebackers, likes linebacker coverage. Gerard Davis never got a chance last year. CJ Mosley's still a good player, by the way, from what I saw last year. So CJ Mosley will be back. So that's one of the pieces. He's middle linebacker. So you're looking for weak side linebackers, strong side linebacker. So off-ball linebackers. Somebody let's go with, KJ Wright knows the defense. You could bring him in. Anthony Walker's an underrated player. He played well last year. You could go all out for Ultra's boy there from the Atlanta Falcons, Luakon, if that's how you say his name. Devondre Campbell's probably going to be pricey, but I don't think... Okay, here's the thing. Campbell, to me, fits the Green Bay defense better than he fits this system, even though he's played it before in Atlanta for a lot of years. He obviously played better in Green Bay. So I'd be looking for more speed at that position and maybe guys that have played it before that you could add as depth, like KJ Wright. There's not a ton of speed at linebacker in free agency. They might have to look towards the draft, and that might be where their second-round pick or something comes in. But somebody like Anthony Walker wouldn't be a bad pick up. The cornerback position is arguably their biggest need. I don't even know if it's arguable. Other than Bryce Hall, I don't see a ton here. So they're really going to look towards cornerbacks in free agency. If they could land a J.C. Jackson, that would be great. But typically they don't put a ton of stock into the cornerback position. This is a younger, rebuilding team, so I'd be surprised if they tried to sign somebody like Casey Hayward, even though he's a great scheme fit for them. I could see Darius Williams being a target for them. I could see Carlton Davis being a target for them. DJ Reed being a target for them. Who else? Joe Hayden can still play. I don't think he'd go there. Who else? Maybe Desmond King. Maybe Xavier Rhodes. But those guys, Rhodes is a little bit older. So you're trying to still find the younger guys, but guys that kind of have that familiarity with that system and have succeeded in that system. But that corner is going to need a lot of work. Safety position, Ashton Davis isn't bad. I don't think Marcus May is going to be back, but lucky for you guys, safety's pretty stacked in free agency this year. You've got a lot of players. Somebody like Malik Hooker could be he played for the Colts and then the Cowboys. He could be a low-key signing that I think fits free safety wise. If you're trying to spend less, Justin Reed, they could go obviously in the draft, like you said. Quandre Diggs is somebody that's great in this system. Marcus Williams, you could spend the money to get him. He's still young. Jordan Whitehead would be a great strong safety in this system. So is somebody like Jabril Peppers, Jaquiski Tart. So I do definitely think Tracy Walker too. So there's a lot of safeties that they could target. So I think they're going to try to bring in a veteran safety and then maybe draft Kyle Hamilton in the draft. That could certainly happen as well. But the Jets have a lot of money and they've got some flexibility and they've got a lot of needs. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But definitely look for Robert Saleh to put a stamp on his defense, specifically at the second and the third level. I don't think edge is a big need considering Carl Lawson will be back, so they're just going to add probably depth. Their D-line is good already, so it's really kind of shoring up that back end and shoring up the offensive line. And then from there, you're adding the flavor of the wide receiver positions and stuff like that to the New York Jets. So the Jets actually aren't as bad of a team or roster or in as bad of a position that I think a lot of people think. So that's the AFC East, guys.